Good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? Hope you're doing well. My name is Allison Dwyer-Selden. I'm the Professional Learning Coordinator for VASCL, and we're so excited that you have signed up for this opportunity today. Our Executive Director, Pam Moran, will join us shortly, but I wanted to make sure we had as much time as possible with Scott McLeod. So, Pam, are you here now?
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
It's great to be here. And Scott, it's great to see you again. Long time no see since 9 o'clock this morning. So we're really excited to have you here. Scott is a person that I consider to be a dear friend as well as a colleague. And I have admired his work going back to 2007 when I first ran into some work that Scott was doing with this crazy wild video that went viral called Did You Know Shift Happens? And it was about the changes that were happening in the world and the implications of that for all of us in our educational communities, as well as in nations, in local communities, etc. But Scott has been, in my opinion, one of the leading practitioners who also is an educational futurist, as well as an educational leader. He has been recognized by ISTE for his leadership. He is an author. He is a professor in the world of educational leadership and has just had incredible influence. So I'm thrilled to have Scott here with us. And I'm reminded, and I use this quote, sort of paraphrase this morning, by another person that I have great admiration for, a professor at Michigan State, Rand Shapiro. And Rand says something like this, that no technology has landed in the hands of people all over the world, organizationally, commercially, and now culturally and in education as AI has done. It has moved as quickly as any technology that we've ever seen. And so Scott is going to take us into the world of that and help us really unpack what are the implications of AI in terms of its potential and its pitfalls as we work as educators together. So Scott, welcome. Thrilled to have you here. And if you can make sure that we get your PowerPoint or your slides or your Google Slides into the chat, that will be great. And I'll be adding some other things in as we go.
Cool. Thanks so much, Pam. So I used to do this activity a while ago called Shock and Awe. And what we would do is we would take various technologies and we would put them up on the wall in a continuum. The historical evidence shows us that new technology innovations like AI are reaching deeper into the vast bulk of the population at faster rates than they ever did before. So, for example, it took us decades to get electricity into most people's homes, right? And then it took, a decade or two to get computers in most people's homes. And then it took about 6-7 years for most people to have a cell phone. And now AI has hit and the time horizon is even shorter. Like each cycle of innovation is shorter and more compressed than the one before it. So it's sort of this interesting phenomenon is like, how do we keep up? So I have dropped the link to all my materials from today, along with some additional resources into the chat. And I'll probably just keep doing that throughout the time. But I'm going to launch us and sort of just talk about how we're going to spend our time together today. So it would help if I shared my screen first. So let's do that. And then we'll throw this up here. So hopefully everybody sees a title slide. Okay. And Allison, you'll keep me honest here. There's that web address again as well. So Pam gave me a quick intro. I'm a professor of school leadership at the University of Colorado, the Denver campus, not the main Boulder campus. The policy people are in Boulder, the leadership people are in Denver. I run
Never the twain shall meet, right?
I know, right? So I run a couple principal licensure cohorts, do doctoral students, all the cool professor things that you might expect. I'm also a community leader for ISTE. ISTE is the world's largest education technology organization. And in addition to being a community leader at the international level, I'm also helping to plan the conference next year, which is going to be in Denver. So I'm on the program planning committee, and that's been an interesting view on everything. And then maybe most pertinent for this conversation today is that I'm also the founding director of a center called Castle. Now, not the Castle that most of you know, which is the Social Emotional Learning Castle. This is the Castle, the School Technology Leadership Castle. My Castle is the only university center that's focused on leadership and innovation, deeper learning, and technology. And we've been around since 2005. So we've been around a while. So that's good. I told Pam when she invited me to host this conversation that I am not an expert in AI. And in fact, I'm not really sure anyone in education is, and we'll come back to that later. But our time together is meant to be more of a conversation. This is not a monologue. I'm not going to shove stuff out at you. This is not a sit and get for 90 minutes. We're going to be breaking back and forth between small groups, sharing out in the large group, making sense of things, etc. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send you into some small groups, and you can just introduce yourselves to the other people in your group. And a couple sort of good starting questions for your group would be, what do we already know about AI, and what kind of questions do we have about artificial intelligence, particularly as it intersects in our professional roles in education. So let's start there. And then just trying to get my mouse to cooperate. We'll come back and see what people have. Okay, so let's do 4 rooms and hope everybody has a good conversation. We'll see you in 3 minutes.
We wasn't ready yet.
We didn't get to.
Sorry, Dwayne, only gave you 3 minutes to say hi. So, we'll have some more chance here. Welcome back, everybody. We're a small enough group. I don't know if we'll probably do a couple more breakout groups just to break up some smaller conversations quickly, but we could probably handle a whole group conversation as well. So what are some things we already know? What kind of questions or concerns do we have? What's out there?
Ethical questions in the use of AI, whether in a professional or setting, mostly
Okay.
educational setting.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, talking to persons who are studying, AI has raised issues in some of their programs where their institutions have put in place certain, are trying to put into place certain policies as it relates to how professors deal with the use of AI when it comes to work being given to them. And, in that kind of situation, I was telling the person in my room that I know of someone who is doing a thesis on the use of ChatGPT at the higher education level and its impact on cheating or something like that.
Gotcha.
So,
okay, cool. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? What do we already know? What kind of questions do we have?
My kids are already starting to use it and try and hand in essays. I'd like to know, how can I use it to help learning instead of stop learning?
Nice. Me too. Cool. We'll talk about some of that. What else? Anybody else want to chime in?
So I've always been an early adopter of technology, both in my classroom and just in life in general. But I think AI is the first time that it's like given me pause. Just, and I'm like, spoiler alert, I was in this morning session too, because I thought they were 2 separate things. But so that helped open my eyes a little bit, but it's that whole, I worry about us just not thinking anymore or not being creative anymore. Or, I want the kids to be able to filter out what the computer just throws at them, and instead of taking it as God's honest truth all the time, that's really my biggest concern.
Gotcha. So, Michelle, we'll talk some more about that, and we're going to follow same general flow as we did this morning, but we'll focus a little more on the instructional side, and we'll also be more conversational because there's 10 or 12 of us instead of 200 of us or whatever. So, thanks for coming back for round 2. Cool. Anybody else want to chime in here before we roll a little further?
Lauren, you had sort of an insight from a different state, even though you're in Virginia, you're still working in Vermont. Do you want to share what you think's on the minds of Vermont educators around this?
Yeah, I had said that plagiarism is something that people had brought up as a concern. I think that we have folks who are very tech savvy and feel like this is just the next thing we've got to get used to, that we used to worry that if a kid had their phone, that they'd be looking everything up on Google, and then how would we know if they knew anything? And I think we've worked our way through that, but I don't think people quite have a handle on AI yet and all the different pieces with the various technologies that are out now, but then also coming probably fairly soon.
Okay, cool. All right. Thanks for some early thoughts. I promise we'll have more time to unpack all of that further. Share my screen again. And as I did this morning, I'm going to define a couple terms here for us because I think it's helpful. So I think it's useful to understand how we got to where we are today and sort of seeing how this stuff has progressed over time. And if it seems to some of you, tech nerds like me that we're starting pretty basic, bear with me. I promise that I'll connect it all before we're done. So the first term that I think is worth defining here is the term software, right? And we're used to hearing the word software. Software is those instructions that we give a computer that tells it what to do. It's very much like a recipe. It only does what we tell it, right? It follows the steps. The result hopefully occurs. So, if we were using a calculator analogy, you push certain buttons and the calculator does certain things, and it always does those things and it never does anything else. Right. And back in the day, really in the early days of computers, everything was text. So you had to go to this little prompt and you had to type in weird code and words and language, and then a program would start to run. And then we created visual interfaces for our computers, which helped a lot. Right. So now the way this works is that you click on an icon on your laptop screen and your email opens up. Right. You enter a formula into your spreadsheet and you know that formula is going to divide the number in this cell by the number in that other cell. You push a button on your cell phone, it opens up your camera and microphone and starts recording video of your grandkid. You call customer service and you get that automated phone tree menu, and you can never get out of it because it's programmed to lock you into certain pathways. Like all that is examples. All those are examples of software where it's just following, the instructions and can never deviate in any way. And that's how most of us think about and are used to computers. But what has happened here is that our computer scientists and data scientists have started to recognize that computers are really good at pattern recognition. And so they've created this new set of activities around computers that we're calling machine learning. And the idea is that you can teach computers how to learn from data to make decisions or predictions. So for instance, when I open up my phone and it says, hey, you've got 23 pictures of Pam on your phone. Would you like to make a Pam album, right? Based on facial recognition. It's just recognizing, patterns of the photos that I've taken and trying to be helpful to me. The software that looks at lung x-rays or mammogram scans and is trying to detect anomalies that might be early signs of cancer, for example. That's another example of computer pattern recognition. When public transportation departments plan city bus routes, right, the computer can help with that. When the credit card company is monitoring your activity automatically for potential signs of, fraud activity, those are things that all just sort of happen in the background. The computer software is doing pattern recognition and it's learning, and then it's trying to make decisions or predictions about what's going to happen next. And then what gets interesting here is that we have combined computers' ability to learn with sensors. Okay, so now we have cameras that can see things, we have microphones that can hear things, we have sensors that can smell or taste, they can like detect chemicals. We have other sensors that can actually touch and give haptic feedback. We have sensors that can detect things that humans can't, like sounds or smells that are outside of our range, or radiation waves that we can't see, or things that might be underground or underwater or up in space that we can't reach. And when we are able to combine machine learning with sensors, then all of a sudden, all kinds of interesting things happen, like smart homes and smart roads and smart farms. Robotic surgeons, cars that drive or park themselves, earthquake detection with early warning alerts, the device you wear on your wrist that monitors your health and tells you if might be early warning signs of something, real-time language translation where people who speak two different languages can converse in real time with each other as it recognizes what the other person is saying and so on. So what's happening here is that we're making this shift where under the software paradigm, computers just helped us do things. We decided what would get done and the software helped us. And now computers are starting to do things that we do as people without us. Right? Like they just operate in the background. We don't have to be active agents in that. And that's where the term artificial intelligence comes from. It's this idea that machines are acting in a way that is similar to the way humans act, right? It's communicating like we do. It might be making decisions like we do. It's sort of mimicking our human intelligence. And so that's where sort of the blanket term AI comes from. It's that as machine learning possibly combined with sensors gets more and more robust, it's able to do more things that feel human and can communicate to us in human ways. So, Pam and I were having this conversation earlier today that we're already using AI in a number of different ways that we don't even recognize. AI is manifesting itself in our day-to-day life activities and all kinds of realms and things that we do. So it might be everything from simple spelling or grammar or syntax checking in our word processors to, offering to autocomplete my sentences or emails, or even checking my tone in an email that I'm about to send. Those creepy online ads that follow you around and recommend products, that's an example of AI where it's learning from your activity and making some decisions and recommending things. When you're offered multiple routes in Google Maps, that's another example of AI where it's scanning all the different things and recognizing patterns and making decisions about what your best routes are and so on. And so let's pause there and talk about where else do we see AI manifesting itself in our lives? What other examples do we have beyond the ones that I had? Maybe you don't even know it's so subtle or hidden. Anybody got more examples?
I mean, like Netflix and different things like that, different channels like that. Some of I know like the kids use Snap and all of that with the different filters. Some of that could be AI.
Yes, absolutely.
All the predictive ads I don't want to see that something thinks I should.
Hey, Pam, I see that you've ordered prune juice once. Would you like a lot more prune juice? Or whatever.
That's what I was going to say. Amazon continually trying to predict what I want based on office supplies that I order, for example. Then it, wants to send to me everything.
Yes, absolutely. It's not always as smart as we wish it was. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else have ideas?
I just thought about chatbots. Like when you try to go to a help, when she said Amazon, that I'm one of those people. So when you go to the little chat to get some help and it just comes up with different questions for you to just respond to, those kind of chatbot type things.
Absolutely. It's trying to steer you towards existing resources. Good. Okay, cool. Anybody else? All right. So that's AI in a nutshell, and it's manifesting itself in a variety of different ways. And then there's a subcategory of AI called generative AI. And generative AI is the branch that is making new things that didn't exist before. And that could be everything from ChatGPT to Dolly or Journey Ed and the art side, Ava and the music side, and so on. But basically, it is doing creative work like creating new music or stories or art that didn't exist and we thought was only possible by humans. And this branch of AI, the generative AI, is the stuff that is freaking us out, right? And the face you're looking at right now, for example, is the face that my friend Derek, who teaches social studies in Kansas, made when I showed him ChatGPT, right? Like it was basically that face for about an hour and a half. And so let me give you a couple of example continuums that kind of run us through the sequence just to understand what we're talking about. So if you go to Google search and you type in economy of India, then it will give you a list of websites, and then you have to do the manual work of investigating each one further, right? And then as Google shifted into machine learning, what it started to do is that as you start typing in economy of India into the search box, it starts recommending, right, websites that have to do with Indian economy for you. And it starts, doing that proactively rather than just a set list and so on. And now we're getting to sort of the age of Siri and voice activated assistants where you can ask Google verbally to search something like, hey, Google, economy of India, and it will start reading back to you content from websites. The gross domestic product of India is right? And it decides which websites to reach you from. And then generative AI, sort of this, this sidekick, this sub branch of AI goes even further where you're like, hey, Google, tell me about the economy of, India. Tell me about the economy of India. And it says like, hello, here is a 36 slide deck that I have made for you that summarizes multiple key economic indicators for India for the past decade. And you're like, whoa, that's a little freaky, right? Because now it's not just sending us websites or reading us data from a few seconds. Like it's actually creating this product that's kind of useful and complex and we thought only humans could make, right? Here's another example. You type into Excel some kind of formula because you're trying to add up a row of numbers with a sum at the end, and that's software, right? Type in the formula, this thing happens. Machine learning is when Excel or Google Sheets or whatever pops up and says, I see that you typed in a formula to add up the cells in A2 to M2. Would you also like to do the same thing for items in rows 3 through 12? Because it seems like those are similar. And you're like, yes, that would be helpful. Thank you so much, right? And then AI is when you start doing some data mining, like, hey, we have this massive school district student achievement database for the past decade. Can you just, I don't know what's, rather than me trying to figure out what questions to ask and what analyses to run, can you just go find some patterns in it and tell me what you see? And AI is very good at that. And then generative AI would take the next step and say like, hey, thanks for giving me this massive student achievement database. I've created a 3-page written summary report with trends for the school board for you, right? And again, it's that last step that's really freaky because now all of a sudden it's taking narrative text and charts and graphs and tables and putting it all together into a, relatively polished product. And we're like, whoa, now it just feels really weird, right? So that's the last step of all this that feels so bizarre to us. Okay, so how do we think about all of this? What are some possibilities here? Let's stop here and just have a conversation. So what are our own experiences with generative AI? Why does it feel so creepy? What's happening?
I think the weird thing when you get a slide deck that's perfectly, half of you wants to say, okay, maybe I can go home for dinner now, and the other half is maybe I better read this first because who knows if it's really what I wanted to say or the conclusions I wanted to draw. So there's that, that slippery slope, I think, of relying on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, who among us have not double-checked Excel formulas just to make sure that they're giving us the answer we want, right? And so, I think we have to get past this sort of like all or none mentality, right? So, and Lauren, I think you highlight this is that the 3-page written summary report for the school board or the 36 slide deck on the economy of India probably is not going to be perfect. In fact, it may have some mistakes, but you know what? It might be 80% of the way there, which means I've just saved 80% of the work, right? And so the question is not, is it absolutely perfect? And of course, humans also are not absolutely perfect, but is it helpful and useful to us, right? And if it gives us a big, good running start at something, then, it feels kind of good, right? Like, I don't want to, Marjorie, I don't want to spend all my time sifting through every single TV show and movie on Netflix to see, like, is this one I want to watch, right? Like, it's actually helpful to have some recommendations. Like, you keep watching science fiction movies, here's one you haven't watched yet, or whatever. So what else on the generative AI side? What are our experiences? What have we been playing with? Why does this feel creepy?
In this morning session, I met with my partner one of the times, and he was talking about how some of his teachers at his district were using AI to give feedback onto an essay. But then he's like, then if the essay is written by AI, and you're kind of using AI to grade AI, and then you kind of have to think like, okay, wait, did the kid learn anything? Because they didn't did they even read the AI essay they turned in? And then as the teacher, you're like, I don't even know what the kids said they learned because I didn't give the feedback, the computer did. So it's kind of like, okay, what happened? Did anything actually educational happen here?
Right.
Michelle, that is perfect.
Wow.
I love it, Michelle. We can just let the machines talk to each other and we can go drink tea on the back porch.
Yeah, we're good. You know what? Everybody just get on their Facebook or whatever app du jour and just everybody relax. It's fine.
I love it. Anybody else? Early thoughts on sort of progression from the software modality into machine learning and AI and generative AI?
One of the things that I think about, Scott, is that I'll date myself right now, because when I started college, my first math course, we were using slide rulers. And somewhere during the year, the flip occurred and Texas Instruments rolled out their first 4-function calculator. And our professor was like, I don't want to see one of those in this room. And so then we moved from that forward and onward into every version where now kids can have 10 different calculators as apps on their phones and maybe never work out some of the equations I had to work out using the back of a textbook with formulas and a slide ruler. And, so we always resist this next generation of technology. So my question is, what makes this different than the slide ruler progression?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think, I'm just gonna slide us into sort of the next phase of this conversation, because I think it's going to take us exactly there, PM. Hold on, I need to make sure I share the right screen. That one, good. Okay. So I think, generative AI really invites us to think differently about learning and teaching and schooling. And so I'm going to show you 5 examples that I think are going to really cause us to ponder that question and to really maybe stretch our thinking a little bit. And I'm going to start with an app that some of you may be familiar with, which is called PhotoMath. This is a mathematical application. So here we go.
And activate your camera on your device to take photos of your math equations. You can adjust the window of the photo to capture the full equation if needed. PhotoMath will then process the equation and provide you with the solution. As you can see, PhotoMath will provide you with multiple ways to solve the problem, like graphing or using the quadratic formula. PhotoMath will also provide you with videos and step-by-step instructions on how to solve the equations as well. There's also an option to share the math solutions with peers from the PhotoMath app. Let's try another equation with using the free version of the app. As you can see, PhotoMath will provide you with the solution and show you the steps of how to solve it.
All right, so that's example 1. Okay, here's example 2. Imagine that you're in a middle school PE health class, and you're like, we were talking about health and nutrition and wellness with the 7th graders, and I don't want to just give them like a multiple choice test or, you know, some kind of quiz. Let's do some kind of authentic performance assessment that really feels more real and real connected to, you know, real life. And so we're going to have students pick different life conditions like, you know, type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure or whatever. And we're going to have students create a 1-week exercise and nutrition plan for a person with that condition that sort of shows that they can apply the knowledge they've learned in class. You know, sounds like a pretty great assignment to me, right? So let's take that assignment and let's plop it into ChatGPT and just see what we get. All right, so now ChatGPT is running, right? Notice up at the top, it gives some disclaimers. You should always consult with a healthcare professional or registered dietitian, right? And then that said, it starts running into what a nice exercise plan might look like that focuses on cardio and strength training and flexibility, and there's some elements of rest and so on, right? And then as you go further in, here's some general guidelines around the nutrition plan. Here's some foods that would be good for this person with this condition that they could eat, and meal, you know, some basic meal plans for every day. And then down at the bottom, once we get through the whole week, right, then it gives us some more reminders about portion sizes and monitoring blood sugar levels and so on. So middle school assignment, 7th grade, authentic performance assessment. Here we go. All right, cool. Here's example number 3. So we're in science and we are really unpacking human genetics in AP biology or, you know, regular biology, whatever. And students are deciding what inquiry projects that they want to learn further on. And a student says, hey, you know, I've been reading a little bit about the interesting sort of possibilities and dangers around engineering human embryos, and I want to dig more into that, right? And so, you know, it's teachers like, cool, write a 5-paragraph essay or some kind of summary report that shows what that does. And so once again, we can just put that prompt into ChatGPT, right? And see what we get. Okay, so now it's flying, so we'll start at the top again. Okay, so we got a nice topic introduction and introductory paragraph, right? Then we have a paragraph on the positive side. What are some things that genetic engineering of human embryos might do for us? However, that's also what makes it very perilous. That's the next paragraph, right? Some ethical implications, also going further on the downside of designer babies and so on, and then a nice conclusion paragraph at the end. Can also do that exact same question, exact same prompt, but this time I can say use college level vocabulary, right? And what you will see here is that we get the same sort of written summary, but now it's using higher level terminology, higher level concepts. The writing is more complex, and so on, simply by adding the phrase using college level vocabulary. And I'm a terrible AI prompter. So if I can get these kind of results, right, with really bad prompts, imagine what somebody can get with really good prompts. However, the manipulation of the germline is not devoid of profound ethical and practical quandaries. I mean, that's a big sentence right there, right? Okay, so you kind of get a sense of what happens here. All right. And then here is a high school coding example, because ChatGPT can not only handle text, but it can also handle code. So you can imagine, for example, in a high school coding class that a student's written code is not working, and the student can input that code with an instruction that says, please help me find the bug in this function because it's not working right as I work on my arrays. And then ChatGPT will actually come back and not only explain where the mistake is, and where the bug is in the code in narrative form, but it will also offer you correct code that will help you figure out what it should look like instead. So that's example number 4. Then example number 5 is from the 2022 AP Government and Politics exam given to students all over the world. And this is one of the free response questions, right? There's debate over the use of the Senate filibuster. Take a position on whether or not it's beneficial or detrimental to policymaking in the U.S. Congress. You must use at least one piece of evidence from Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution or a couple of the Federalist articles. In your response, make sure that you have a defensible claim or thesis that establishes a line of reasoning. You must support your claim with at least two pieces of specific and relevant evidence, one of which must come from one of those documents up above. You have to show why your evidence supports your claim or thesis, and you also have to respond to an opposing or alternate perspective using refutation, concession, or rebuttal. So that's the prompt that was given to AP students, AP government students everywhere. And if we put that into the ChatGPT box, and this is the part that blew my buddy Derek's mind, right, as he teaches AP government to high schoolers in Kansas.
You know what I think is interesting about this, Scott, is ChatGPT kind of writes like what teachers really value in writing.
Yes. I mean, yeah, ChatGPT is not a creative writer, right? ChatGPT is a very linear,
organized,
somewhat formulaic writer, right? If you read enough of these, they start sounding a lot the same, but you know what? So do AP exam essays. So, and so on. So what you see here, right, is you just see ChatGPT doing exactly what it asked us to do on the AP exam. And so, you know, as my buddy Derek said, as he kind of read through this, like, it's not perfect. This is probably at least a 3 on the exam and maybe even a 4. And one of the things we're seeing sort of nationally and internationally is that when you give generative AI national level assessments like the SAT or the bar exam or an AP exam or something like that, that it actually does really, really well, which is sort of interesting, right? Okay, so now that you have seen 5 examples of generative AI in action, let's have some small group conversation real quick just about how do you think about what I just showed you, okay? So let's do breakout rooms, and we'll bring you back in 4 minutes and see where you are with all that. Okay.
My kids said we're going back, I guess.
All right.
Love doing that. That's what that's all about.
Marina, I just put you on a timer, friend. I don't know what else to tell you. So Dwayne, let's start with you. Like, what were some of your reactions in your group to those 5 examples I just gave you?
I guess the entire group was wonderful and terrifying at the same time.
That pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? Okay, so let's talk about the wonderful parts and the terrifying parts.
Wonderful because I think teachers can use it to lead instruction and have great ideas and have students involved and doing things. Terrifying because students will learn how to get around whatever the teachers are doing, which they've been doing forever anyway, but now this just gives them an extra tool to do that.
Okay, cool. So remember that I led with this slide, which is that generative AI invites us to think differently about learning, teaching, and schooling. So what generative AI really invites us to think about is, what are we really trying to accomplish here, right, in schools? What do we really mean by learning? What do we really mean by teaching? So for instance, you know, we used to protest calculators, right? And I'm also cognizant that very few of us now calculate square roots and do long division by hand anymore, right? And so the question for us is that, you know, how can we be thoughtful about this stuff rather than just fearful? And how do we figure out what the right balance is between what we want students to know and be able to do on their own versus what we want students to know and be able to do with the tools that we know are going to be available to them throughout their entire lives, right? And so when we start throwing up sort of these gut level responses around like banning things or cheating and plagiarism, or students should memorize that thing, or what, fill in the blank, whatever. Like, it's inviting us to think really hard about the sort of invisible architecture of schooling and what we think schooling means, right? So, and I think the calculator is a perfect example because, when we have elementary kids, we want them to understand conceptually what's happening with those foundational math concepts. But at some point, we say, all right, you kind of got it. You don't have to keep doing division by hand. You can use the calculator, right? And very few of us as adults do any kind of calculation by hand anymore, right? So somewhere there's a transition point where we start getting comfortable with the tool doing the grunt work of the mathematical calculation for us, rather than us having to do it all and hold it all in our head and blah, 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 right? And even when we use the calculator or the spreadsheet or the advanced statistical software, whatever, we want to make sure that we understand conceptually what's happening so we can verify the accuracy of the results that we're getting, right? And we don't just accept blindly whatever it gives us, but we're willing to turn over a lot of that cognitive work to the device, right? And then I think the reason that ChatGPT freaks us out so much is that just like the calculator sort of took the grunt work of mathematical calculation and took it over for us, ChatGPT might be doing the same thing for us around writing. And that feels weird because writing feels like an inherently human activity, right? Around sense making and around creating, and it just feels weird. So,
and as educators, we have always promoted writing as the ultimate in critical thinking and communication. And we've always held writing to this standard of demonstrating, knowledge and proficiency. So yeah, I think you're onto something with that, Scott.
What else, friends? I showed you a high school coding example. I showed you a middle school health and wellness example that was trying to be authentically, like real world performance task. I tried to show you a high school genetics inquiry project example. I showed you the classic AP exam free response question that, tens of thousands of students take all over the country, right? Then of course, photo math on the math side. Like, there's all kinds of stuff to unpack here.
One of the things that I wonder about, Scott, is in the same way that we hoped that in the use of procedural technologies like computation using devices, that we would chase the work that kids did in math up the food chain, so to speak, so that they would be more engaged in higher level thinking and analysis, in expanding their capability to problem solve in multiple ways. And I don't know, maybe the jury is still out on whether after all these years of that technology, whether we've really done that in math. But one of the questions I have is, if AI makes some things that we humans do easier to accomplish more quickly, what happens that's going to cause kids to engage in more complex, intelligent learning?
Right. Well, it all depends on how we design the learning task, right? And, it's interesting the rhetoric that we put around some of this stuff. So I think about like the robotic vacuum cleaner, like Roombas, right? Like if Roomba was in education, we would say like, oh no, kids, you can't use a robotic vacuum. You have to have grit and resilience and persistence and show that you can have that foundational skill of vacuuming, right? Whereas as adults, we're like, vacuuming stinks. Nobody likes to vacuum. If I can afford a robotic vacuum, I'm getting one, right? So, if you take sort of that Roomba mentality into school, how many things are we making kids do over and over and over again, even when they get it, instead of changing the task and freeing us up to do something else that feels more worthwhile, more valued, more inspiring, more impactful, right? Like, it invites us to do that because we have the tool now that we didn't have before. So now, instead of spending all of our time in grunt calculation work, doing, long division and square roots and whatever else we need to do with mathematical formulas, we can focus on things like building bridges and designing airplane wings and, measuring out what a new courtyard for, the senior citizens home might look like, right? And that feels like more authentic, inspiring work for students And yes, we still have to do the math and use the math, but we don't have to spend so much of our time on the grunt calculation part. We can focus it on the connecting with our community, making an impact part, right? So that's kind of where we are. So, but that requires us to rethink learning, teaching, and schooling. So, what else, friends? Showed you some examples.
What is the grunt part of writing? I guess is something I'd like to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. Pam, you want first shot at it? You want me to go?
The grunt part of writing.
Yeah.
I think that for me, the hard part of writing is generating the ideas, whether it's in fiction or nonfiction, that I want to somehow communicate, and figuring out what's the language that I need to use to communicate. And I've seen 5-year-olds in that struggle, and I've seen 18-year-olds, and I've seen myself in that struggle at ages that I don't want to discuss, because ultimately communication occurs in a variety of ways in today's world, visually, in narrative form, in nonfiction form, in dictation. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get to that. But ultimately, for me, it always starts with, how do I portray the ideas in my head and get what's in my head into some format that I believe is important to communicate? And that's grunt work to me.
Yeah. So Katie, I'm going to throw on the screen again that AP exam question, right? So here's the AP exam question about, is the Senate filibuster beneficial or detrimental to us, right? And then it has some requirements about what the response should look like, because the goal of the prompt, of course, from the AP, from the College Board, is to try and unpack students' thinking, right? Or at least understanding of the filibuster and how it works, along with some of those foundational documents, right? And then ChatGPT explains it all for us, right? So Katie, what do you think the goal here is for us in terms of students' understanding of both social studies and writing? What do you think the College Board was aiming for?
I guess to see whether or not the students' knowledge of each area that was being asked, and if it is that the information that they presented, that their responses would be one that came together cohesively with all the information that was required for each of the prompts.
Yeah, so I mean, the basic idea is like just on its face, right? We're saying, do you understand the filibuster well enough to write something about it? And do you understand some of these foundational documents well enough to connect the issues raised in those documents, to the filibuster and how it operates in policymaking with the Congress, right? Okay, cool. What else are we trying to maybe make happen around this writing piece?
Applicability.
Yeah, applicability, absolutely right. So here's an interesting question for us, right? So is our goal to have students memorize and hold in their heads for some period of time their understanding of the Constitution and the Federalist Articles and what filibusters are and how policy is made in the US Congress? Or is our goal to have students have enough awareness of this that when they need to dive deeper into that issue, they can find what they need and understand it? So, and again, this goes to the heart of some of the things we believe about schooling and teaching and learning, right? Like, how much do we need kids to carry in their heads, and only in their heads without any other resources available to them? It must come from your head. Versus, you don't have to carry all that in your head, but you have to know how to get what you need and make sense of it, right? So that you're not bamboozled by lies or misinformation or disinformation or errors, right? So which one are we striving for in school?
Both.
Okay, cool. So Fair enough, right? And the question for everybody is, where's the balance, right? Where's the balance about what do we have to hold in our head all the time without any resources, right? Just from your head, and what do we need to be able to get and understand and make sense of and not be bamboozled by? And at younger grades, we tend to lean into foundational knowledge and skills, right? Stuff that we want to have in your head. You need to understand how multiplication works, right? You need to know how to read, right? You need to know how to comprehend that document that you read in 7th grade, whatever, right? But then as we get into these older grades, we keep carrying that paradigm, right? You have to memorize all these formulas in trigonometry and know what they mean. You have to know sine, cosine, and right? You have to be able to calculate the volume of cubic solids in geometry, right? Like you have to be able to write robust essays on filibusters and policymaking, even though you may never need that in your life, right? Like this is the balance. Y'all are awfully quiet. This is hard stuff.
It is. I think that it's sometimes hard to think about what you don't know. And this is kind of new terrain for me. There are folks here that know a lot more than I do, but I think, Scott, one of the points that you made early on about how quickly comes from that Rand Spiro piece about how quickly that this technology is moving into the world. I mean, it is securing territory at a rapid pace, and it's hard for us to keep up with it.
No, absolutely. But notice that the language we use helps us unpack our beliefs about what learning, teaching, and schooling are really for, right? So for example, what if we assign that free essay response to a student in an AP government class and they use ChatGPT to help them generate that answer, right? When would we call that cheating? And when would we not call that cheating? Anybody have ideas? Poor Dwayne. He just like... One way we might call it cheating is if we expected students to be able to carry all of that information in their head without any other resources available to them other than what we had talked about previously, right? We've talked about stuff previously, we read things previously, but at this moment in time, you have no access to anything else other than your memory, and you must give back to me what I think you know and understand about this topic, right? And if you don't do that, if you use some resource to help you with that, like ChatGPT, then we're going to call it cheating.
And we're going to know that how?
Well, that's a different question. Right? How do we detect whether or not they've done that, right? But first we have to just decide, is it cheating or not, right? Now, most of us know that out in the real world, when we're doing real world tasks, we're not cut off from all of our resources. We're not cut off from other people. We're not cut off from devices. We're not cut off from the web. We're not cut off from previous people's thinking and so on, right? So if our goal, when we were 26 and out of high school and college and in work, and we're like, they're talking about the filibuster on the news. I need to understand that more. What are they doing, right? And somebody mentioned the Constitution and the Federalist articles, and I don't even know what those are anymore because I wasn't paying attention in 9th grade U.S. history. And I went to Google or ChatGPT or something, and I generated this for myself so that I understood what is happening here, right? Would we call that cheating?
No, we would call it learning. I mean,
we call it learning. Dang, Dwayne, listen to that. So that's interesting, right? As soon as we get people out of the artificial environment of school and into an authentic real world context, now we call it learning instead of cheating.
and that's the problem because that's what you want them to do. But how much of that do you want them to do?
Right. So, Dwayne, I think the question for you and all of your educators, right, and colleagues and everybody is, are we going to pretend that these tools don't exist? When do we start doing some kind of gradual release of responsibility to the tool, just like we do to calculators, right? When do we start saying you no longer have to do the grunt work of memorization or calculation or writing code or writing or whatever, right? And when can we start using these other things to help us understand things, to learn things, to create things, and so on, right?
Mm.
And that's a really good conversation for us to have as educators, because there's no right answer. Other than we're pretty sure that both ends of the continuum are not the right answer. Blocking it all out is not the right answer. And letting kids just run wild and never do any thinking work or writing work is also not the right answer, right? But somewhere in the middle, particularly as we go up the grades, we have to figure out, where do we want to live as a school system, as teachers, as students, as learners, right?
I
And
think
we have to have
sometimes as educators, I'm sorry.
No, I just said we have to have the conversation.
Yeah, and that the conversation is exactly what I was going to say. I think sometimes as educators, we get so caught up in an assignment for kids, and we're looking at this chat GBT and going, they will turn in an assignment that didn't require them to, struggle, do a productive struggle. What if the chat GBT was actually the learning tool for, class conversation? What if the teacher in 10 seconds created this wonderful document that the kids then could access? And then, there's a learning assignment where they discuss that essay and that information. So when you were talking about thinking differently, that's what I started thinking about with the chat GBT as maybe a slide in for us to think about ways to use it well.
Yes, absolutely. And so, I think the people that I'm inspired by right now, as we think about AI, are the ones who are trying things, right? They're just playing, they're testing things out, they're trying things with kids. So, Allison, to use your example, right? Like my buddy Steve Dembo in Chicago, he was a middle school teacher last year, and he and his kids just played with ChatGPT all year, right? And he would do things like he would break them into 3 groups. Like, here is the, you may use no resources whatsoever group, and you must write your essay on this. And then there was the, you must use ChatGPT group, and you must take their answer as is and submit it, right? And then there's the group in the middle, which was, you can use ChatGPT, but then read it over, edit it, make it better. Where does it have weaknesses? Where is it strong? Where is it helpful to you? Where is it missing things or has gaps, right? And guess what? Even the middle schoolers could recognize that the group that had the best essays were the group in the middle, right? So that feels like productive work to me, right? Like, we're recognizing that the tool exists. We're also recognizing its limitations, and we're unpacking together in class what that means, right? So I think, I think we need to play with this stuff. We need to, there's this whole art to even just like crafting prompts or engineering, it's called prompt engineering, where we get good prompts that helps the machine give us a good result back. And, wouldn't it be a great assignment if we invited students and educators to just investigate and go deep on how AI is being used in various disciplines, right? Like, you can imagine a conversation in a middle school or high school class particularly, right? That went something like this. What are some different ways that scientists or historians or writers or engineers or artists or coders or whoever are using AI to do their work? Like, let's identify a few different things to investigate and go deeper. Let's break into small groups. Let's report out on Friday. Let's be creative. Like, it's going to be awesome, right? Like, we don't know. Let's explore together and figure it out. And I think that's those kind of examples where we're playing and you're experimenting and we're just trying things. We all recognize that we're new to this, right? But we're not shunning it, right? They help us make policy not from gut fear or ignorance, right? Like, we're taking the time to learn and we're informing ourselves rather than just labeling it cheating or plagiarism or, whatever, and it needs to be locked out and blocked out and so on. So I think that feels, to me at least, like more of an authentic approach.
Truth. So, Scott, here's an example from the adult world that I think creates some conundrum of this. I don't know if anybody else has been in meetings recently where you have this sort of a blank screen that shows up and it has somebody's name on it. So you think, well, they must be here, but they just have everything muted out. But then it turns out that whatever the name is actually their AI bot that has shown up in the meeting and they can't be there. So they send their bot. I don't know how you send your bot, but you send your bot. And the bot is there and is collecting the meeting and then does a transcript of the meeting that it shoots out to everybody in the meeting, including maybe things that were discussed at the end of the meeting in the parking lot, so to speak. And that recently just popped up and I thought, okay, what are the implications of that? I mean, I think about what it would like to be a teacher and have kids send all their bots to your virtual, class if we'd been in the pandemic. But now I'm thinking, if there's like a person here that's blanked out, is that their bot? And what's going to happen to the context of this transcript? Where does it go?
So
Okay.
Pam, let me give you another example of that in the higher ed level, right? So we ask hundreds of thousands of college freshmen each year to get up at 7:30 a.m. and walk over to the auditorium and sit in a room of 400 people and listen to their professor lecture badly at them for an hour, right? And then leave. And there's no interaction and there's no, sort of like opportunity to work together. You're just sitting there listening to the professor profess, right? And we take attendance because we want to penalize people if they're not there because they should be there learning, right? And so on. And you know what's going on in that undergrad's head? Why am I here, right? Like if all they're going to do is lecture at me, why don't they just record it and I can watch it or listen to it on my own time while I'm on the treadmill or, I'm having dinner or, I'm walking back from, a cappella club or whatever, right? Like I feel like that's a legit question, right? Like, why are we requiring all those people to show up if they're not going to do anything meaningful together? And so if I have a meeting scheduled for myself, and boy, we have really bad meetings in universities, do I want to go waste an hour and a half of my time? Or do I want to send my bot? I know I'm going to get an automated summary of what happened there. That's going to distill the hour and a half down to the 2 minutes of meaning that I need to make out of it and I can do something else more productive with that time, right? Like, am I a bad employee for wanting that? Is that student bad for not wanting to go to the lecture hall?
Scott, you are quick. Those are the kinds of issues that are going to emerge. And eventually what we're going to really start to see are policies written whether it's at the state board level or the school board level to govern this work. And the more educated that we get, I think the better that we will be able to craft policies that, Scott, as you said, you don't want to go to the extreme on either end, but you better have something that helps to guide the behaviors and actions and uses of this kind of technology, because otherwise it's going to be the Wild West.
Right. So we have about 15 minutes or so left. I want to make sure that we highlight some ways that AI can be helpful to you as an educator, not just cause you to freak out a bunch and cause headaches, like philosophical headaches, like, poor Dwayne over here. So I'm going to show some examples of ways that ChatGPT might be useful to you, right? And I'm just picking one of the generative AI tools. So for instance, we have a lot of teachers right now who are experimenting with how might we use generative AI to help us make lesson plans, okay? So taking that top item, create a lesson plan to teach the Krebs cycle. Now, most of us probably don't even remember what the Krebs cycle is, but I can go into ChatGPT. You all can see my ChatGPT screen, yes? Okay, and I can say, create a lesson plan to teach the Krebs cycle, and ChatGPT ponders for a sec, and then here we go. Objective, materials, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to start saying not only what is our learning objective, but here's the materials we're going to need, roughly 50 minutes. Then it starts time marking for us. Spend 10 minutes working on this stuff, spend 20 minutes on direct instruction. Here's an activity we can do for 10 minutes with the molecular model kits. We can do a quick video recap, right? Here's a quick 5-minute assessment and check for understanding. Here's some conclusion work we can do with some homework. Here's ways we can differentiate and extend our work for students. I mean, I haven't taught the Krebs cycle, but it feels like that's at least a decent starting point for me as an educator, right? And I don't have to come up with all that myself. And that took 10 seconds. Right? And if I don't like that idea, I can hit regenerate and it will give me maybe some different ideas to play with. But that beats going out and searching Google for an hour and a half, right? About, finding different ways to teach the Krebs cycle or whatever. So a lot of teachers are playing around with sort of, how can it help me with my lesson planning and so on. Let me show you another example. So we know that students respond differently to different means of representation. So you could throw a question to ChatGPT like, I'm trying to introduce chemical reactions to high school students. I want to use a variety of resources like videos and websites and simulations and games and infographics. What are some resources that are out there for me? And again, I can just put that prompt into ChatGPT and off it goes. Here's some video sources to check out, right? Here's some websites that we can explore. Here's some simulations that might be available to us. And then I can pick some of these things for like making playlists for students or choice boards or, other ways to sort of engage students with a variety of different resources that all will help us learn about chemical reactions, right? And I can use my trained judgment as an educator, but this helps me make my life easier, if I'm trying to introduce some kind of complex topic. Another thing that teachers always struggle with is differentiating instruction, right? So, what if we're reading a long, complex article from the New York Times, for example, and I need to break that down to different reading levels, right? So you can throw in a prompt like this one, where we say, I'm going to throw this article into ChatGPT. And this one is about the federal government shutdown, right? So I'm going to put in this really long prompt. And what you see at the top here is there's the prompt. Give me 3 summaries at different grade levels. And then the rest of it is the copy pasted article that I stole from the New York Times. And I put that in there and ChatGPT chews on it for a minute. And then it starts turning out different summaries at different reading levels. And again, if you didn't quite like what you got, you could hit regenerate, or you could wordsmith what it gave you and add a few details here and there, right? But all those uses of ChatGPT feel like they're sort of useful to me as an educator. I mean, maybe you don't. Here's some more. What if I'm trying to figure out what are some different teaching strategies or approaches I can use to teach a complex play or novel, like A Raisin in the Sun? Okay, so again, I just throw it into ChatGPT. Give me some ideas. Help me teach this complex text. And it immediately starts giving me 3 different approaches for how to address the central ideas of the play and unpack those with students. And again, it might not be perfect, but it might be one of those 80% of the way there solutions for us, right? One of the things that we struggle with as educators is we're so immersed in our subject area from an academic sense, we don't always know what the real life application is of some of those concepts. So you can imagine a math teacher saying, I really want to connect students learning about ratios to how those get used out in the real world. So again, if I'm trying to figure out what some alternative or authentic assessments or some performance tasks might look like, I can just throw into ChatGPT, what are some real life applications of ratios to give me some ideas, and off we go. And in just a matter of seconds, ChatGPT will give me a whole bunch of ideas. And again, these could be choice boards, this could be playlists, these could be differentiation or extension activities, it could be centers or learning stations, right? There's lots of ways that we could use this. We could even have students, dive into these and create some centers or some stations, which would also could be very interesting. Sometimes when we are teachers, I'm on the third one here, it's really hard for us to figure out how to take really complex abstract concepts like federalism and break it down, particularly for younger students, right? But again, you can give ChatGPT that task, right? How do we explain federalism to sixth graders? And so you just throw it in there and see what it gives you. And I love how it reminds us at the beginning what we're trying to make happen. We got to simplify. We got to make sure we have relatable examples. We might need a visual aid, right? Like it reminds us all that before it dives in. Basic concept, relatable example. This one's around ice cream and chocolate syrup. Here's a visual aid that apparently is a tree. Examples that they might be able to connect with, emphasizing the balance and so on. So we're chunking it. We're creating relatable examples for sixth graders and so on. And again, ChatGPT came up with that in mere seconds. One last example that I'll run by you here is that often we are trying to find ways to connect the material that we're addressing in class to students' interests and passions, because that helps them maybe stay engaged in what might otherwise be fairly dry material. So you could take a middle school student who really loves football, for example, and you can say, how do we connect that with our English language arts work around connotation and denotation? What are some creative ideas to maybe do that? And then similarly, we could do the same thing by taking out connotation and denotation and putting in math concepts. And without skipping a beat, ChatGPT starts spitting out a variety of different ways that we can connect what we're doing in math class to students' interests in football as well. And again, it's sparking our thinking about how to approach this stuff. Okay. Cool. So I shared several different ways that classroom educators might think about using ChatGPT, which is one generative AI tool, to make our own lives easier and help us be more productive and maybe save some time. What are your reactions to some of those examples I just showed you?
I think they're helpful. Quite helpful in narrowing down specific activities that we would like to bring out.
Maybe I'll ask a different question, was that if you showed other educators in your area some of those examples that I just showed you, what might the reaction be?
I think a lot of people would be relieved because, education is difficult, especially if you're differentiating on so many different levels. I think post-pandemic, our kids are everywhere right now. Their learning levels are everywhere, and I think that would be really helpful.
Thank
I
you,
agree, Michelle.
And we are encouraged to embrace AI and to use it to assist us. So we
Right.
haven't been given any limitations as yet. So
Yeah. So interesting that we didn't label these uses of ChatGPT as cheating or plagiarism or not doing your own work, right? Like, why is it different when we use it than when they use it? It's interesting to ponder, isn't it? Because students are also using AI tools to help them make their work easier and to accomplish tasks. And again, it goes back to, what is our central goal? Is our central goal to just have kids hold a bunch of stuff in their head without any resources? Or is our goal to have kids live in the environment in which they will live in throughout the rest of their lives and learn how to use that in productive ways and make sense of it so they don't get bamboozled? But if we're saying that educators using ChatGPT is helpful, but students using ChatGPT is cheating or unproductive or a lack of thinking, then I think we have to unpack that a little bit for ourselves.
I think my mindset is just, I know that I could do it on my own without chat GPT or anything else. I could sit down, I could spend the time and crack that out. I could also filter out the things that are there that are gonna be terrible,
Yeah.
from my, years in the classroom. Whereas the students won't necessarily have that. I think that's my major concern, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, Michelle, which brings us back to the calculator, right? At some point, we decide that students have enough conceptual understanding that they no longer have to do square roots and long division by hand. They can start using the calculator. And what this generative AI and some of these other tools are inviting us to do is to think about those same things for things like writing, things for creating resources, right? Creating multimedia, editing photographs, making videos, writing text in a variety of different contexts, variety of different audiences, right? Like it's the same thing. Because yes, we still want kids to know and be able to do stuff on their own. And we also want kids to know and be able to do stuff with the resources that will be available to them throughout their life. And so that gradual release of responsibility. And when we know when students can prove to us or we're comfortable saying it's okay for you to use ChatGPT for this right now, right? But again, if we don't quite know when that point is, then I think the solution for us is to play with it and to play with it with students, right? And say, and have the same conversations that we're having with them and with our parents and with our community members and with our administrators. I don't think our solution is to just quickly have a gut reaction, call it plagiarism or cheating or not thinking or whatever, right? And just run from it because it's not going anywhere and they're just going to use it without us anyway. And then we get in all these fights, right? So, I'm not going to pretend that there are no issues with this technology. I mean, I think we got all kinds of sort of ethical concerns that are popping up around AI and generative AI. So, for example, one thing we know is that the databases that these tools are being trained on are completely secret. So we have no idea what's going into them. And as a result, we're also finding out, for example, that there's a lot of equity and bias concerns. Right? Whatever goes in helps feed the algorithm and helps feed the results. My buddy Ken Shelton, who talks a lot about equity with technology, likes to do an example where he will pull up an image generator, for example, and he will say things like, show me 6 images of a pilot, and he'll get 6 images of an older white man. And then he'll say, show me 6 images of a home healthcare aide, and he'll get 6 images of a young Latina female, right? Like, right? Like, what are the inherent biases and what databases are feeding those results? Because of course we know that there's a variety of people in both of those professional roles, but inevitably those are the results you get, right? And so that's troubling on a number of different fronts, and we have to unpack some of that. But again, unpacking that publicly and with each other is more helpful than simply running away from the tool. We want students to properly attribute work that isn't theirs. It's really hard to do that with ChatGPT because we don't know where it came from because the database was secret, but we might be able to at least say, yes, I use ChatGPT when I use this, right? And this whole battle around where we're trying to detect whether or not a kid used AI, these AI detectors, that turns out to be a miserable failure. These AI detectors just fail left and right. And they particularly penalize writers for whom English is not their primary language. So if, a non-native English speaker is trying to use a tool like ChatGPT to help them with their writing and make it better, because you can take a piece of writing and put it into ChatGPT and say, help me make this better. Help me clean this up on grammar or syntax, whatever, right? Then they get penalized by the teacher who then says, oh, you use AI, right? So, but I think that's probably something we want them to be able to learn how to use to help them, right, with their writing. So, there are all these sort of ethical dilemmas and lots more sort of equity and ethical dilemmas that keep popping up as we go through this. But I guess I'll leave you with these 2 last thoughts because we're nearing the end of our time here. And the first one is this. We know that humans with machines are more powerful than the false binary of humans or machines, right? And we've learned that lesson over and over again throughout history. I'm a history major. And every time we try to say it should only be humans, right, or it should only be machines, we always find out that it's the combination that's actually the most powerful and productive, right? It's the Steve Dembo teaching middle school students how to write with ChatGPT example, where it's the middle group that's the most powerful and does the best writing, right? So that's thought number 1. Try to avoid the false binary. The second thought for us as classroom educators and policymakers is that AI is currently the worst it will ever be. Right? Like I'm old enough to remember when these were our cell phones. And we were like, wow, like this is what we have, right? Like that's cool. And they were terrible. But at the time, right? Like it caused all kinds of issues and consternation, and it also gave us new powers. And we're sort of at this stage, this phone stage of AI right now, right? Like whatever we have with AI right now is the worst it will ever be. It's only going to get better. And it's only become more powerful and more capable. And so now is the time for us to start figuring some stuff out, because it's only going to get more complicated as things go on. So once again, there's that web address again. I will paste it in our chat area for the Zoom box. Otherwise, we're here at the end. Pam, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts for us.
I just appreciate that that the people that were with us when we started this, Scott, are still here. That we are recording this. Allison will get recording out to each of you. We also will be doing a little bit of editing and getting it up on the VASCL webpage, and also in Virtual Virginia to share. I think this has been a fabulous opportunity for people to get stretched a little bit in their thinking today, Scott, to maybe look at some of the implications of this that they want to start to think about at their own division or school level. And most importantly, one of the things that I think is really critical is that Scott is one of those people who, I don't know, I think he has the ever ready bunny battery in him, because he says to every group, hey, here's my email. Here's how you can get in touch with me. If you have a question or want to follow up, get back with me. And people say he does. I do think he is a bot. I'm not sure he's real.
Like Pam, I'm just really, invested in trying to help you all translate all this stuff into, whatever meaningful action makes sense for you all in your local context. So if there's any way I can be of help whatsoever, please reach out. I threw in my contact info there, but also on the link for all the resources, there's ways to contact me. I'm happy to chat at any time. I'm a phone call or text message or Zoom meeting away. Next time I'm in Virginia, I can stop by if I'm in your area, whatever's useful to you. So, don't be strangers. Feel free to reach out at any time if you want to unpack some of this further. Otherwise, let's try to, move from beyond, poor Dwayne's like, this is making my head hurt reaction, which I have every day, right? And like, let's work together to figure some of this out, because nobody's going to figure it out if we don't, right? So let's keep hacking at it. And thanks so much for spending some time with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
And have a wonderful evening, and don't let your head explode thinking about AI. Just go enjoy your families and a great meal, and put the to-do list away, or just give it to your bot to do it.
Right. And my resources are available. Use them any way you want. So you don't even have to ask. So have fun.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.